You ask about what we can do to help get proper reform for the fact that we have immigrants in this country and illegal aliens in this country. And I always separate the two because immigration is a legal process. Illegal aliens coming in is not. And we fight over this, and we have people who try to meld the words immigration together with illegal immigration, and somehow it's all the same thing. Don't be fooled. I know one man who hasn't been fooled. He was an INS agent for over 30 years. He's a senior fellow with CAPS in California. He is a writer. He is a well-known speaker. I think he's one of the foremost authorities on immigration and illegal aliens in the country. And I'm talking about Michael Cutler, who's with us here this morning on the Gary Sutton Show. Michael, always a pleasure to have you aboard. And I know you're down in South Carolina this morning.
Yes, I am. And unfortunately, I'm going to be heading north shortly after this radio program. If I can make it up to New York and back into the refrigerator, or perhaps more appropriately, the freezer.
You're flying back up, I'm assuming, right?
Well, either that or I'm going to get a dog's flesh.
Well, Michael, it's always great to have you in this morning. I know you've been down there with a Tea Party group, and tell us a little bit about that.
Sure, absolutely. By the way, I just want you to know that even as you and I are chatting, I'm looking at my terrace. I'm about 5 or 6 blocks away from the ocean. I'm looking at the Atlantic Ocean, palm trees swaying, dogs running on the beach, birds in the air. It's about 70 degrees here or something.
Quit it.
But I'm leaving here, so I'm going to join you in the refrigerator.
Okay.
I was here so that should make us all feel better, that I will suffer along with you.
Warm and fuzzy inside now. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, and I also want to put out 2 websites because sometimes we forget to do a little bit of housekeeping. And there's 2 websites I'd love your audience to go visit. My own personal website is michaelcutler.net, one word, C-U-T-L-E-R, michaelcutler.net. And for years, I've been a senior fellow with an organization known as CAPS, Californians Population Stabilization. Their wonderful website is CAPSWeb, C-A-P-S, CAPSWeb.org. You know, they got a bunch of great writers. I am the guy that does immigration primarily for them. Been with them for a bunch of years, and it's about getting information out there that you're not getting in the mainstream media. And, of course, you do an amazing job as a journalist providing that insight. And I was at the Tea Party convention, and what's interesting is that I am a registered lifelong Democrat. The Democrats are no longer Democrats. I think they're Martians.
Okay.
But I'm a labor guy, and I would rather fight than switch, as the old cigarette commercial says. Because we've got to pull these politicians back to where they belong. And it's both political parties that are knifing Americans in the back. And I was given the privilege of speaking for 20 minutes. They had some really great people there, candidates for the Senate that want to unseat Lindsey Graham. They are so angry about amnesty out here and comprehensive reform that in South Carolina, do you know the word I kept hearing and it knocked me over?
Probably Grahamnesty?
Grahamnesty, yes, because he was one of the 8 gangsters, or as he called it, the Gang of 8. And everybody was enamored with Ted Cruz. And if you look at Ted Cruz, he said, and someone just sent me a link because I had a discussion about this with a bunch of great folks. And Ted Cruz, and I saw him in Washington when I was there to the D.C. March on Washington for Jobs. And he said that he likes one component of comprehensive reform, the H-1B visas for high-tech workers. But he didn't think comprehensive reform went nearly far enough. He said it was much too weak a measure. He wants to increase H-1B visas. Are you ready for this? By 500%.
Good grief.
So, you look at that and you say to yourself, does anybody remember that immigration laws were just enacted for 2 purposes? Protect innocent lives and the jobs of American workers.
Yeah.
Think about that.
Yeah, it's amazing. Protect innocent lives and jobs of American workers. And what has immigration done? You've studied this a lot over the years. What has immigration done to the wages here in this country, speaking of American workers?
Well, the influx of aliens has driven them through the floor. See, originally, the way we got the American dream and the way that we got the best standard of living in the world, which is no longer the case, but the way we had been there at the pinnacle was by protecting American workers from foreign workers. And in point of fact, that was exactly what's in the law. You may not bring in a foreign worker when there are American workers ready, willing, and able in the same area geographically to do the job. You can't bring in a foreign worker. And the idea was that you don't make Americans compete with foreign workers. Along comes Alan Greenspan in 2007. 2009. And he testifies for Chuck Schumer about the need to reduce basically the gap in the wages between the haves and the have-nots. Not by raising the bottom, but by lowering the top.
Yeah.
And he referred to it as wage inequality.
And we're in the midst of that whole initiative right now again. Obviously, that's become the theme of President Obama and those who would follow that particular way of looking at things.
But that's right. So in other words, what people don't understand is it's not about raising up the bottom so much as it's about lowering the people in the middle class. And then I read an interesting statistic, and you're going to love this one. Brand new statistic. Guess how many people on the planet, the super, ultra, phenomenally, unbelievably wealthy, if you had a balance beam, where you have all of the value, all the wealth, all the property of 6.5 billion people, 7 billion people, whatever the figure is, how many people do you think would be on the other side of the scale because their holdings are so great that they could balance the rest of humanity's holdings, wealth, and so forth?
How about 85 people?
You saw the article. That's
yeah,
right.
I did. I read it. But
is that unbelievable?
It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. And, but
and so, by the way, I want to make a point. Nobody running for Congress, nobody doing anything, pulls out the 9/11 Commission report and says, wait a minute, folks. The 9/11 Commission report warned us that immigration fraud was the embedding tactic of choice for the terrorists who killed us, not only on 9/11, but on other occasions. In 1993, there were 2 terrorist attacks in the United States. Mir al-Milkansi shoots up the CIA. He's a Pakistani, lies on an application for political asylum, and he got political asylum. A month later, Ramzi Youssef, one of the Trade Center attackers, had been granted political asylum. And another guy, Mahmoud Abu-Lima, got agricultural amnesty, like Chuck Schumer's program. And so we saw where the system continues to crash and burn. You look at the Boston Marathon bombing case, the Tsarnaev brothers, who I'm willing to bet. You want to take the bet? I don't think so.
I'm not going to take it.
But they lied on their application. They said, credible fear, we can't go back to Russia. You send us back, we're in big trouble. That's why you get political asylum. As soon as we gave them lawful status, they hopped on an airplane, and guess where they went? Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, Trey Gowdy and Goodlatte, the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, held a hearing a couple of weeks ago, and I watched the hearing. It was almost 4 hours long, which is extraordinary. And what they talked about was how the Mexican cartels are now coming to the United States and getting political asylum. And then Bob Goodlatte turns around and a week later says, well, there's no real reason not to give work authorization to aliens who are in the country and they're undocumented. And I thought to myself, how about the lack of integrity to the entire system? One of the questions they asked was, how long is the interview that you give people applying for political asylum? The answer was 20 minutes. The follow-up question is, where's the hearing conducted, or where's the interview conducted? Are you sitting down for this one, Gary?
I am.
On the phone.
Really?
They conduct the interview by phone. What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah. Holy cow. Yeah, I'm who I say. I'm sure.
Illegal immigration is a system that's all screwed up.
You know, the worst word in Washington today for me is comprehensive. You know, we're looking at comprehensive health care right now and how well the government's handling that. We've seen other comprehensive programs where the government's taking things on. Now we want comprehensive immigration reform. And again, I don't see the need for a comprehensive immigration package. I see the need to cure problems that we have in this country and put them together piece by piece in order. Is that a wrong approach, Michael?
No, but it depends on what. See, that was what they said. We're not going to do it all at one shot. And I wrote a piece that I entitled, if you remember, "How Do You Eat an Elephant?" And of course, the answer is one bite at a time.
Right.
And my fear is that under the guise of piecemeal, we're going to do a little bit here and a little bit there. If at any point you start giving people employment authorization and they're here illegally, there are two terribly wrong things about it. If that's what I'm afraid they're going to do. And say, well, it's not comprehensive. We just did it as an individual thing. But we don't know what their names are.
Yeah. And the thing that gets me, though, and I people say, well, you're archaic on your beliefs on this. And I say, okay, what do you think you should do? And I said, number one, we ought to shut down our borders, both north and south, and make sure that we have a way, and also east and west, I might add, and make sure we have a way of cutting down on the amount of people coming in instead of having a wink and a nod in the other direction. Number two, let's make sure we go after people who are illegally employing these people to come into the country and slap some penalties and fines and jail time on them. That's going to make some real sense. And then number three, let's try to deal with the situation of all the people we have here. You've talked about upwards from 20 to 40 million that have been in this country illegally. Let's deal with that situation once we've cut off the water coming into the cellars, so to speak, and how are we going to get that out of there?
Well, but you see, the problem is so many people come up with a false argument. And, what they like to say is you can't deport 11 million people. God knows you certainly can't deport 20 million.
They'll always say, you're going to kick doors down, right? You're going to kick doors down and throw them out. No, that's not it.
No, but that's right. Because, by the way, if you're going to try to give them employment authorization, suddenly you're going to be dumping millions of authorized workers into a labor pool that can't find work as it is. But the other problem is you give them official identity documents. And this comes back again to the 9/11 Commission report, that if you give people identity documents and you can't verify who they are, we are allowing terrorists and criminals to put themselves into their own witness protection program. So my answer is very simple. If you are here in violation of the laws that are designed to protect us, and by the way, this nonsense that running the border isn't the crime. How many times have you heard that lie?
Well, it's the people who overstay their visas that disappear into the crowd.
Well, not only that, but do you know that if you run the border or if you come in after you've been deported, you're committing a 2-year felony. Mm-hmm. And if the reason you were deported is because you're a criminal, the penalty is a maximum of 20 years in jail. I worked with Senator Al D'Amato back in the early 80s to write that law. Are you going to tell me a 20-year felony isn't a crime? So when a Border Patrol agent sees people running the border, he doesn't know whether or not he's witnessing a felony. If a cop walks by a bank and a guy's got a shotgun and there's a dead guy lying on the floor, he knows he's witnessing a bank robbery. It's a felony. But people running the border may or may not be committing a felony, and you don't know until you arrest them and fingerprint them and interrogate them, and then you find out. This notion that we're only going to go after the criminals, how do you spot the criminal running the border when you don't know who he is or whether this is his first time or 15th time or whether he's a fugitive because he just killed 20 people in his own little community in some other country or he's a terrorist?
Michael, why do we, and I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you to put the volleyball above the net for you to hit it anyway.
Sure.
Why do we treat illegal aliens coming into our country differently than just about, well, I will say just differently than any other law that we have that is broken?
Well, it's all about follow the money. If you look at how many people make money on immigration, right, legal and illegal, do you know that since 2007, and I just wrote an article to the Social Contract, it's a quarterly magazine, it should be out next week. My manuscript was about 31 pages. I'm not sure how many pages it will take in the magazine, but I'm guessing at least 15, maybe more pages. Do you realize that since 2007, and again, put your seatbelt on, folks, guess how much money has been spent on lobbyists? Bill Gates, Zuckerberg, the Chamber of Commerce, I call them the Chamber of Horrors. The list goes on and on. Over $1.5 billion, with a B, $1.5 billion. I start sounding like Carl Sagan. We start talking about billions. Yeah. But that's exactly how much money we're talking about. Now, this is not just chump change. This, I believe, in their mind, is an investment, and they expect a significant return on that investment, whether it's driving down wages. And, it's remarkable because I was listening to the debates among the candidates, and they asked immigration questions that nobody knew were immigration questions. Let me give you an example. How do you cut the deficit? Smaller government. That was the standard answer. So when you approach people and you say, well, what do you mean by smaller government? Fewer Border Patrol agents? Well, of course not. Fewer food inspectors? No. Fewer air traffic controllers? Fewer ICE agents? Absolutely not. Well, what do we mean by smaller government? Nobody really seems to know half the time.
Yeah, it's a buzzword.
But that's the mantra.
Yep.
But you know what they don't talk about? Every year, right now, over $200 billion, with a B again, Carl Sagan's alive and well for the moment, and I met the guy, he was quite a guy.
Billions and billions, yeah.
Billions and billions, $200 billion wired out of the country every year by foreign workers. And if you look at something called the multiplier effect, because the money doesn't get spent inside the United States, it doesn't get invested here, you might as well set fire to it, and maybe when I go back to New York, that wouldn't be such a bad idea, at least get some warmth out of it. It's utterly lost to the economy. So the equivalent is that we are jacking up our deficit by between $500 billion and $600 billion every year, just looking at remittances. Now let's look at the Americans that get displaced or their wages are lowered. They wind up on food stamps. They wind up on subsidy programs. And instead of paying into the system, they become a drain on the system, not because they're bad. The number of people on long-term disability have more than doubled since Obama came to office. That means we're talking about people who have been working for maybe 30 years. I don't think these folks woke up one morning and said, I'm tired of working. I think a lot of people realize they can't get a job. Dan Rather did a report Dan Rather Reports, a 1-hour special all about computer programmers losing their jobs to people from India. It was called No Thanks for Everything. And what was remarkable is Rather, who's a liberal, and you would have thought would be supportive of Obama, at the very end of this documentary, he interviews this programmer who used to work, I believe, for Blue Shield down in Florida. He said, I worked to get President Obama elected. I was one of his volunteers, and he betrayed us, right in the middle of that documentary.
Wow. Michael, we never have enough time. I'd like to have about 5 hours with you, and you always have such great insights. But, again, remind people where they can go to pick up the information and really be informed.
Well, please go to my website, michaelcutler.net. Please go to capsweb.org. If, by the way, you find an opportunity for public speaking, I love coming out. I'm going to be in Pennsylvania. We expect in the next couple of months, I hope. Contact me through those websites, and please make your voices heard. This apathy is deafening. It's destroying us. Democracy is not a spectator sport. You got to get your voices heard, and please pass the information to as many of your neighbors as possible, because knowledge is power, and that's what that First Amendment is all about. And that's why, as a Democrat, I was happy to join Tea Partiers, because whether I agree with you on everything, at the end of the day, as Americans, we are entitled to even disagree. That's part of what makes America great. Well,
that's the biggest club we're at, is the America Club, and appreciate you being with us as always, Michael. Look forward to seeing you soon, my friend, and have a safe trip home.
Thank you. Try to stay warm in the refrigerator tonight.
We'll do that. Thanks. Michael Cutler with us this morning. Always shy and retiring, as you can tell.